November 7, 1942. 2,300 hours. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The darkness beyond the Marine perimeter was never truly silent. Private First Class Mitchell Page pressed his cheek against the warm receiver of his Browning M 1919 machine gun, listening to the jungle breathe. Somewhere out there, beyond the barbed wire and the cleared killing zone, the Japanese 17th Army was preparing to do what they had done successfully against every enemy they had faced since 1937. They were going to charge. What Lieutenant Colonel Masao Maruyama and his 2,000 soldiers of the 2nd Battalion, 209th Infantry Regiment didn't know was that they were about to encounter a weapon system that would redefine the mathematics of defensive warfare. A 30 caliber machine gun that could fire 550 rounds per minute with such reliability that Marines called it the 51-year-old teenager. Designed in 1895 but perfected to a level Japanese industry couldn't match. In the next hour, Mitchell Page and his 7-man machine gun section would fire approximately 21,000 rounds. They would kill or wound an estimated 200 Japanese soldiers. Page himself, manning his gun after all other crew members were killed or wounded, would account for 41 confirmed kills in 60 minutes of continuous fire. The weapon that made this possible wasn't just a machine gun. It was American industrial engineering at its most lethal, and the Japanese had no equivalent. The weapon Page relied on that night had been born from the mind of John Moses Browning, arguably history's greatest firearms designer. In 1895, Browning created a water-cooled machine gun that used an entirely new operating system based on recoil. By the First World War, his design had evolved into the M1917, the water-cooled heavy machine gun that dominated the Western Front. But the weapon Page commanded on Guadalcanal was different. The M1919, adopted in 1919, was an air-cooled version designed for mobility. It weighed 41 pounds without its tripod, compared to the water-cooled M1917's 93 pounds. This made it portable enough for 2 men to carry and deploy rapidly, yet heavy enough to deliver sustained, accurate fire that lighter weapons couldn't match. The technical specifications told only part of the story. The M1919 fired 30 caliber .30-06 Springfield ammunition from a cloth belt at a cyclic rate of full 400 to 600 rounds per minute, depending on the model. The effective range was 1,000 yards, though Marines regularly engaged targets beyond 1,500 yards. Most critically, the weapon could maintain sustained fire for hours without failure if properly maintained. Japanese forces had nothing comparable. Their Type 92 heavy machine gun, copied from the French Hotchkiss design, fired just 450 rounds per minute and weighed over 120 pounds with its tripod. The Type 96 light machine gun, their squad support weapon, fired only 550 rounds per minute from a 30-round magazine and was prone to jamming in jungle conditions. Neither weapon approached the M1919's reliability or sustained fire capability. The disparity extended to ammunition. American industry produced machine gun ammunition with quality control that ensured near-perfect reliability. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Primers were tested for a consistent ignition. Powder charges were weighed precisely. The result was ammunition that fed smoothly and fired reliably even in the worst conditions. Japanese ammunition, produced under increasing resource constraints and often using forced labor, suffered from inconsistent quality. Cartridges varied in dimension. Primers failed. Powder charges were uneven. Japanese machine gunners expected malfunctions and trained extensively in immediate action drills to clear jams, something American crews rarely needed. Mitchell Page had enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1936 at age 17. By 1942, he was a combat veteran who understood his weapon intimately. Marine machine gun training was exhaustive. Gunners learned to field strip and reassemble the M1919 blindfolded. They practiced sustained fire techniques, coordinating with their assistant gunner to change barrels before overheating. They mastered grazing fire, plunging fire, and the deadly technique of beaten zone fire that created an impenetrable wall of bullets. The two-man crew concept was central to effectiveness. The gunner controlled trigger and traverse. The assistant gunner fed ammunition belts, called corrections, and maintained situational awareness. When properly coordinated, a crew could sustain fire indefinitely, limited only by ammunition supply and barrel heat. On Guadalcanal, Page commanded more than just one gun. His section included 4 M1919 machine guns positioned along a 700-yard front on a ridge overlooking the jungle. This was Bloody Ridge, site of the September Battle of Edson's Ridge, where Marines had stopped a major Japanese attack. Now, 2 months later, the Japanese were returning with greater numbers and renewed determination. The Marine defensive position embodied American tactical doctrine. Each gun was sighted with interlocking fields of fire, ensuring no dead space in the killing zone. Range cards meticulously plotted during daylight marked likely avenues of approach. Ammunition was stockpiled, with each gun position holding 3,000 rounds immediately accessible. Trip flares and barbed wire channeled attackers into predetermined killing zones. Japanese doctrine, conversely, emphasized spirit over firepower. The Banzai Charge, the human wave attack relying on shock and overwhelming numbers, had proven successful against Chinese forces who lacked automatic weapons in quantity. It had worked against British colonial troops in Malaya and Singapore. Japanese commanders believed it would work against Americans who they viewed as soft and individualistic, unable to withstand determined assault. This fundamental misunderstanding of American military culture would prove catastrophic. Marines weren't fighting as individuals. They were components of a weapons system that integrated automatic fire, artillery support, and defensive engineering into a killing machine of unprecedented efficiency. The attack began at 2300 hours on November 7th with artillery barrage that tore through the jungle canopy. Then came the infiltration attempts, small groups probing for weaknesses in the Marine line. Page's guns held fire, waiting for the main assault they knew was coming. At midnight, the Japanese charged. Lieutenant Colonel Maruyama had ordered a frontal assault by 2 battalions, approximately 2,000 men, against what he believed was a weakly held American position. His intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The position was held by the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, one of the Corps' most experienced units, equipped with sufficient automatic weapons to create a defensive fire density Japanese planners hadn't conceived possible. The first wave hit the trip flares 300 yards from the Marine positions. Page's guns opened fire simultaneously, their tracers creating luminous death in the darkness. The beaten zone, that area where bullets strike at grazing height, swept across the approaching Japanese like a scythe. Men fell in windows, cut down before they could even see their attackers. The M1919's sustained fire capability transformed the battlefield. While a rifleman might fire 15 aimed shots per minute, each machine gun was delivering 400 to 500 rounds per minute into the kill zone. The 4 guns in Page's section alone were firing collectively 2,000 rounds per minute, creating a curtain of metal that nothing could penetrate. Japanese soldiers continued advancing into this firestorm. Their doctrine demanded it. Officers led with drawn swords. Men screamed Banzai and charged directly into the machine gun fire. It was courage meeting industrial warfare, and courage stood no chance. Within 20 minutes, the first assault had collapsed, leaving hundreds of bodies in the wire. The Japanese regrouped and charged again and again. Each assault met the same result. The machine guns never stopped firing. When barrels glowed red-hot, crews changed them in seconds, maintaining fire through the barrel change with overlapping sectors from adjacent guns. By 0100 hours, Page's position was under direct assault. Japanese infiltrators had penetrated close enough to throw grenades. His adjacent gun crews were taking casualties. The gunner on his left was killed. The assistant gunner wounded. The crew on his right was overrun, their position silenced. Page found himself increasingly isolated. His assistant gunner was wounded. His ammunition bearers were dead or evacuated. Japanese soldiers were within yards of his position, yet his gun kept firing. He would traverse left, fire a burst that cut down attackers, traverse right, fire another burst, then return to center. The beaten zone swept back and forth like a lethal pendulum. The physical demands were extraordinary. Each ammunition belt held 250 rounds and weighed over 20 pounds. Page was loading, firing, and traversing the gun single-handedly while under direct fire. The barrel change procedure normally required 2 men. He performed it alone, burning his hands on the superheated metal despite asbestos gloves. His personal account, recorded years later, described the surreal nature of sustained combat, time distorted. The gun's rhythmic hammering became his entire universe. Targets appeared as dark shapes in the muzzle flash. He fired based on movement, sound, and instinct developed through thousands of training rounds. The weapon became an extension of his body, responding to threats automatically. Japanese after-action reports, those that survived, described the Marine defensive fire as impenetrable. One company commander reported losing 70% of his unit before reaching the wire. Another described machine gun fire so dense it seemed solid, creating a wall his men couldn't penetrate. Several reports mentioned the psychological impact of sustained automatic fire, noting that even veteran soldiers hesitated to advance into such overwhelming firepower. If you're finding this breakdown of American firepower superiority as fascinating as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got dozens of videos exploring the weapons, tactics, and industrial might that won the Pacific War, and you won't want to miss a single one. Now let's get back to Mitchell Page's incredible stand on Bloody Ridge. By 0200 hours, ammunition was becoming critical. Page had fired thousands of rounds. Empty ammunition cans littered his position. He sent runners to retrieve belts from disabled gun positions, scavenging ammunition from the dead. When belts ran out, he linked partial belts together, something Marine training emphasized for exactly this scenario. The Japanese, suffering catastrophic casualties, shifted tactics. Instead of massed banzai charges, they attempted infiltration by small groups. This played directly into the M1919's strengths. The weapon's accuracy allowed Page to engage individual targets at ranges where rifles struggled in darkness. Its sustained fire capability meant he could sweep entire areas, denying cover to infiltrators. The technical superiority of American ammunition became increasingly apparent. Despite firing thousands of rounds through a barrel heated to glowing red, Page experienced only 2 malfunctions, both caused by bent feed lips on ammunition belts, damaged during handling. Japanese weapons, by contrast, were known to malfunction after just a few hundred rounds in similar conditions. The difference came down to manufacturing precision and quality control, areas where American industry excelled. Around 0300 hours, the intensity reached its peak. Japanese forces, having failed to break through frontally, concentrated their remaining strength against Page's position, correctly identifying it as a key defensive node. They came in waves, climbing over their own dead, determined to silence the machine gun that had slaughtered hundreds. Page responded with a tactic that would become legendary. He picked up the 41-pound machine gun, removed it from its tripod, and began firing from the hip while advancing toward the Japanese. This violated every doctrinal principle. Machine guns were crew-served weapons meant to fire from stable positions. One man couldn't effectively employ them while moving, but desperation and determination overrode doctrine. Page advanced down the ridge, firing bursts that swept the slope. The psychological impact on the Japanese was devastating. They had been attacking uphill against a fixed position, accepting horrific casualties with the expectation that eventually they would overrun the defenders. Now the defender was counterattacking with a weapon that should have been immobile, firing with the accuracy of a fixed mount while advancing. The physics of this feat were remarkable. The M1919's recoil, approximately 8 foot-pounds per shot at 450 rounds per minute, created a sustained backward force that would exhaust most men within seconds. Page, fueled by adrenaline and fighting for survival, maintained fire for several minutes while advancing over broken terrain in darkness. His action rallied the surviving Marines around him. Men who had been pinned down or falling back saw their machine gunner advancing and joined the counterattack. The Japanese assault, already wavering under unsustainable casualties, broke. Soldiers who had charged fearlessly into machine gun fire now retreated in disorder, unable to comprehend defenders who attacked with weapons that should have anchored their defense. By 0400 hours, the Japanese attack had collapsed entirely. Dawn revealed the full extent of the slaughter. Over 300 Japanese bodies lay in and around the Marine positions. Page's section alone had killed or wounded an estimated 200 soldiers. His personal kill count, verified by the bodies directly in front of his gun position, exceeded 41, though the actual number was likely higher given the darkness and overlapping fire. The aftermath revealed the staggering ammunition expenditure. Page's gun position alone had fired approximately 8,000 rounds, evidenced by empty ammunition cans and expended links. The section's 4 guns collectively fired over 20,000 rounds, more ammunition than an entire Japanese infantry battalion carried into combat. The M1919 machine guns themselves showed the effects of sustained combat. Barrels were worn, their rifling eroded by thousands of rounds fired at high temperatures. Receivers were carbon-fouled. Feed mechanisms were caked with residue. Yet the weapons had functioned flawlessly throughout the battle, testament to Browning's design and American manufacturing quality. Japanese weapons recovered from the battlefield told a different story. Type 96 light machine guns showed evidence of parts breakage. Ammunition was found with dented cases and corroded primers. Several weapons had been abandoned after malfunctions their crews couldn't clear under fire. The technological gap wasn't subtle. It was a chasm that no amount of courage could bridge. Mitchell Page received the Medal of Honor for his actions, the citation reading in part, "When the enemy broke through the line directly in front of his position, he stood up in full view and poured deadly fire into their ranks, personally accounting for at least 40 confirmed enemy kills." The citation understated the achievement. Page had demonstrated that superior weapons combined with superior training could enable a single Marine to accomplish what entire platoons struggled to achieve with inferior equipment. But Page's achievement represented more than individual heroism. It showcased the decisive advantage of American industrial capacity and design philosophy. The M1919 wasn't just a better machine gun than Japanese equivalents. It embodied a completely different approach to warfare, one that valued mechanical reliability over human sacrifice, that trusted engineering to multiply individual combat power. The production statistics underscored this advantage. By 1942, American factories were producing M1919 machine guns at a rate of over 2,000 monthly. Each weapon was manufactured to exacting standards, with interchangeable parts that allowed field repair using components from any other M1919. Quality control inspectors rejected weapons that deviated from specifications by even thousandths of an inch. Japanese production, hampered by resource shortages and dispersed manufacturing, never achieved comparable output or quality. The Type 92 heavy machine gun was produced at approximately 300 units monthly. The Type 96 light machine gun, while produced in greater numbers, suffered from inconsistent quality, as manufacturers struggled with material shortages and inadequate machine tools. The ammunition disparity was even more pronounced. American .30-06 ammunition production exceeded 10 million rounds daily by 1943. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone could produce 3 million rounds daily. Each round underwent rigorous testing for dimensional accuracy, powder charge weight, and primer sensitivity. Batches that failed inspection were scrapped entirely, a luxury Japanese industry couldn't afford. Japanese ammunition production, while substantial in gross numbers, operated under constant material constraints. Brass casings were manufactured thinner to conserve copper. Powder quality varied as ingredients became scarce. Primers were made with substitute materials that affected reliability. The result was ammunition that worked adequately in peacetime but failed under combat stress. The training investment also favored Americans. Marine machine gunners underwent weeks of specialized training focused exclusively on their weapon system. They fired thousands of practice rounds, learning the M1919's characteristics intimately. They practiced immediate action drills for the rare malfunctions. They mastered sustained fire techniques that prevented barrel damage while maintaining maximum effective fire. Japanese machine gun training, while thorough in doctrine, was constrained by ammunition shortages. Gunners fired limited practice rounds before deployment. They learned their weapons' theoretical capabilities, but lacked the practical experience that came from extended live fire training. When their weapons malfunctioned in combat, as they frequently did, crews lacked the ingrained responses that American training provided. The tactical employment reflected these differences. American doctrine integrated machine guns as the base of fire around which infantry maneuvered. Defensive positions were designed to maximize machine gun effectiveness, with careful attention to fields of fire, ammunition supply, and crew protection. The machine gun wasn't supporting the infantry. The infantry was supporting the machine gun. Japanese doctrine, influenced by their emphasis on offensive spirit, viewed machine guns as supporting weapons for infantry assault. Defensive positions often place them suboptimally, sacrificing fire effectiveness for concealment. Ammunition supply was frequently inadequate. The result was that even when Japanese forces possessed numerical advantages in automatic weapons, they couldn't achieve the fire density that smaller American units generated through superior integration of weapons and tactics. The psychological impact of sustained machine gun fire proved as important as its physical effects. Japanese soldiers, indoctrinated to believe that spirit and determination overcame material disadvantages, found this belief shattered by encounters with American firepower. After-action reports described demoralization among survivors, loss of confidence in banzai tactics, and increasing reluctance to conduct frontal assaults. American Marines, conversely, gained enormous confidence from their weapons performance. They knew their machine guns would function reliably. They trusted their ammunition would feed smoothly. They believed that properly employed defensive fires could stop any assault. This psychological advantage proved as valuable as the weapons themselves. The battle at Bloody Ridge wasn't unique. Throughout the Pacific War, similar encounters repeated endlessly. On Tarawa, Marine machine gunners fired over 100,000 rounds during the 76-hour battle, creating kill zones so dense that Japanese defenders never reached American lines despite fanatical determination. On Peleliu, a single machine gun section held off an entire Japanese company for 6 hours, firing an estimated 15,000 rounds without a single weapon malfunction. On Iwo Jima, on Iwo, Marine machine gun sections faced their most severe test against Japanese forces entrenched in prepared positions with excellent fields of fire. Yet American gunners, using the same M1919 weapons that had served since Guadalcanal, consistently outfought their Japanese counterparts. The weapons that had entered combat in 1942 performed flawlessly in 1945, testament to their robust design and quality construction. Japanese industry attempted to respond. They developed new machine gun designs, including the Type 99, which incorporated some lessons from captured American weapons. But development took years, production was limited, and resource shortages meant even new weapons suffered from quality issues. By the time improved Japanese machine guns reached frontline units, American industry had moved on to even more advanced weapons like the M1919 A6, with improved barrel change mechanisms and higher sustained fire rates. The fundamental problem for Japan was that they were fighting an enemy whose industrial base could outproduce them by factors of 10 or 20 in virtually every category, while simultaneously maintaining quality that Japanese factories couldn't match, even at lower production rates. American workers, many of them women who had never seen a factory before Pearl Harbor, were manufacturing machine guns to tolerances of .001 inches. Japanese factories, staffed increasingly by forced labor with minimal training, struggled to maintain even basic dimensional accuracy. This industrial disparity manifested in countless ways beyond just weapons production. American forces had ample spare parts, allowing rapid repair of damaged weapons. Japanese units often cannibalized multiple broken weapons to create one functioning gun. American units received regular resupply of barrels, allowing replacement before wear affected accuracy. Japanese gunners fired the same barrels until rifling was completely gone, accepting degraded performance as inevitable. The ammunition supply chain told the same story. American machine gun positions on Guadalcanal could request ammunition resupply and receive thousands of rounds within hours. Japanese positions on the same island rationed every round, with machine gunners receiving strict orders not to fire without explicit permission from officers who understood that ammunition resupply was impossible. Before we continue with how this weapon changed Marine Corps tactics forever, I want to ask you to do one thing. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We're building the most comprehensive library of Pacific War content on YouTube, and your subscription helps us continue producing these detailed historical analyses. Now let's see how the two-man weapon became the backbone of Marine offensive operations. By 1943, the Marine Corps had refined its machine gun employment to a devastating art. The two-man crew concept had evolved into a sophisticated weapon system that integrated seamlessly with rifle squads and supporting arms. Each Marine rifle platoon included a 3-gun section, giving it firepower that exceeded entire Japanese companies. The offensive employment of machine guns showcased American tactical innovation. Rather than leaving machine guns in static defensive positions, Marines brought them forward during assaults. Using the M1919A6 model, which featured a lighter mount and improved barrel change mechanism, gunners could displace rapidly between firing positions, providing continuous suppressive fire while riflemen maneuvered. This mobile employment of what Japanese considered strictly defensive weapons consistently surprised enemy forces. At Cape Gloucester, Marines advancing through jungle terrain would suddenly establish a machine gun position, suppress Japanese defenders, then leapfrog the gun forward while riflemen assaulted. The tactic repeated across hundreds of yards, each bound covered by accurate, sustained automatic fire. Japanese forces had no doctrinal response. Their machine guns were too heavy for rapid displacement, their crews too small to move weapons and ammunition efficiently, and their tactical doctrine didn't envision machine guns as offensive weapons. American Marines were rewriting the rule book based on superior equipment and training. The evolution of the M1919 during the war demonstrated American industrial adaptability. The original 1919 model gave way to the A4 with a heavier barrel for sustained fire, then the A6 with simplified barrel change, and finally the A6E1 with reduced weight. Each improvement came from combat feedback, with changes implemented and new weapons delivered to Pacific units within months. Japanese weapons development, by contrast, was glacial. The Type 92 heavy machine gun that entered service in 1932 was essentially unchanged throughout the war. Proposed improvements were shelved due to production limitations. Even when Japanese engineers developed better designs, factories lacked the capacity to retool for new models while maintaining output of existing weapons. The technical details of the M1919's superiority become clear when examining its operating system. John Browning's recoil-operated design used the barrel's rearward movement to extract the spent case, load a new round, and cock the firing mechanism. The entire cycle occurred automatically, requiring only that the gunner hold the trigger and the assistant gunner feed the ammunition belt. This automatic operation was remarkably reliable because it used the cartridge's own energy to cycle the action. There was no complex gas system to foul with carbon, no delicate springs to break, no adjustment required for different ammunition types. The weapon functioned identically whether firing the first round or the 10,000th in Arctic cold or tropical heat, clean or filthy with jungle mud. Japanese machine guns used different operating systems with varying reliability. The Type 92 used a gas-operated system adapted from the French Hotchkiss design. It worked adequately when clean and well-maintained, but was sensitive to carbon fouling and environmental conditions. The Type 96 used a similar system scaled to smaller cartridges, with even greater sensitivity to dirt and fouling. The ammunition feed system also differed significantly. The M1919 used cloth belts that fed reliably in any orientation. The belt could be twisted, muddy, or partially damaged, and still feed correctly. The weapon could fire equally well from the left or right side by simply reversing the feed mechanism, allowing positioning flexibility. Japanese machine guns used rigid metal strips or box magazines that were sensitive to damage and required careful handling. A bent feed strip would cause immediate malfunction. Magazines had to be loaded precisely and seated firmly. In combat conditions, these requirements led to frequent feeding failures that American weapons simply didn't experience. The barrel change procedure illustrated the attention to crew ergonomics in American design. The M1919-6 featured a barrel release that could be operated in seconds while wearing gloves. The barrel lifted straight out with its carrying handle, allowing bare-handed handling even when red hot. A cool barrel dropped in from above, locked with a simple twist, and the gun was ready to fire. The entire procedure took under 10 seconds for a trained crew. Japanese heavy machine guns required extensive disassembly for barrel changes, often taking minutes, even for experienced crews. In sustained combat, this meant Japanese guns had to cease fire for extended periods to cool barrels, creating gaps in defensive fire that attackers could exploit. American guns simply swapped barrels and continued firing indefinitely. The quality control in American manufacturing extended beyond just the weapons themselves. Every component was inspected multiple times during production. Barrels were tested for straightness and bore concentricity. Bolts were measured for proper headspace. Extractors were tested for tension. Completed weapons underwent proof firing with high-pressure loads to ensure they could withstand combat stress. This quality control meant that any M1919 part would fit any other M1919 weapon. A barrel from a gun manufactured in Massachusetts would function perfectly in a weapon made in Connecticut. Springs, bolts, and other components were completely interchangeable. This allowed crews to cannibalize damaged weapons for parts with confidence that everything would fit and function. Japanese manufacturing, lacking such precision, produced weapons where parts were often hand-fitted during assembly. Components from one weapon wouldn't necessarily fit another, even of the same model. Field repair required skilled armorers who could file and adjust parts to make them work. American troops could swap parts in minutes. Japanese armorers needed hours. The impact of these technical advantages compounded in combat. American machine gunners could sustain fire indefinitely, limited only by ammunition supply. Japanese gunners had to pace their fire, balancing the need for sustained suppression against the reality of frequent malfunctions and difficult barrel changes. In defensive battles, this meant American positions could maintain constant fire, while Japanese positions fired in bursts, separated by pauses for cooling and maintenance. Mitchell Page's 41 confirmed kills in 1 hour represented not just personal skill, but the full expression of American industrial and tactical superiority. A Japanese machine gunner of equal skill and courage, using the best weapons his nation could provide, simply couldn't achieve the same result. The weapon wouldn't sustain the required rate of fire. The ammunition would malfunction too frequently. The barrel would overheat without quick change capability. Post-war analysis by both American and Japanese military historians confirmed this assessment. Japanese after-action reports consistently described American machine gun fire as overwhelming in volume and accuracy. American reports rarely mentioned Japanese machine gun fire as a significant threat. noting instead that Japanese automatic weapons were easily suppressed or destroyed. The casualty statistics supported these observations. Throughout the Pacific War, Japanese forces suffered disproportionate casualties from American machine gun fire. Estimates suggest that machine guns accounted for 30 to 40% of Japanese combat deaths, despite representing less than 5% of American infantry weapons. The M1919 was killing at 8 to 10 times the rate of rifles, exactly as designed. American casualties from Japanese machine gun fire were substantially lower, not because Japanese gunners were less skilled, but because their weapons couldn't achieve the same sustained fire density. A Japanese Type 92 position might inflict casualties during initial contact, but was quickly suppressed by American counterfire. An American M1919 position could dominate an area for hours or days. The psychological impact of this firepower disparity evolved throughout the war. Early in the conflict, Japanese soldiers demonstrated willingness to charge machine gun positions despite horrific casualties, believing that spirit and determination would prevail. By 1944, this had changed. Japanese troops increasingly sought to avoid American machine gun fire, using infiltration and night attacks rather than frontal assaults. This tactical adaptation, while sensible, played into American strengths. Marine doctrine emphasized coordinated defense with interlocking machine gun fires precisely to prevent infiltration. By avoiding frontal assaults, Japanese forces lost their numerical advantages, while American firepower remained fully effective against smaller infiltrating units. The evolution of Japanese tactics in response to American firepower revealed their strategic dilemma. They couldn't match American industrial output. They couldn't achieve American weapons quality. They couldn't train crews to American standards due to resource limitations. Their only option was to avoid direct confrontation, which meant surrendering the initiative and accepting gradual attrition they couldn't sustain. By war's end, the M1919 had become the standard against which all other machine guns were measured. Its reliability, sustained fire capability, and ease of maintenance set benchmarks that influenced post-war weapons development globally. The Soviet PK machine gun, the German MG3, and numerous other designs incorporated lessons from Browning's masterpiece. The two-man crew concept that Mitchell Page exemplified became doctrine for machine gun employment worldwide. Modern military forces still organize machine gun sections around the gunner-assistant-gunner team, recognizing that this division of labor optimizes sustained fire effectiveness. The principles Page demonstrated on Bloody Ridge, maintaining fire through crew coordination and proper ammunition management, remain fundamental to machine gun employment today. The industrial lessons proved equally enduring. American success with the M1919 demonstrated that quality manufacturing, rigorous testing, and continuous improvement based on user feedback created weapons that functioned reliably under the worst conditions. This approach became the template for American weapons development throughout the Cold War and beyond. The comparison between American and Japanese machine gun programs illustrated a broader truth about industrial warfare. Technical superiority mattered, but only if it could be manufactured in quantity, with consistent quality, and supplied to frontline units with adequate ammunition and spare parts. Japan understood machine gun technology. Their engineers could design competitive weapons, but their industrial base couldn't produce them in sufficient numbers with adequate quality while simultaneously supporting all other wartime needs. America faced no such constraints. The same factories that produced automobiles before the war were churning out machine guns with automotive precision. The same quality control that ensured cars would function reliably ensured machine guns would fire tens of thousands of rounds without failure. The same distribution networks that delivered consumer goods to every corner of America delivered ammunition and spare parts to Marines fighting on remote Pacific islands. This industrial dominance extended beyond machine guns to every aspect of warfare. American forces had more artillery pieces that fired more shells more accurately. They had more vehicles that operated more reliably. They had more aircraft that flew more hours with higher availability rates. In each category, the advantage came not from revolutionary technology, but from superior manufacturing quality and industrial capacity. The Japanese military's failure to grasp this fundamental reality until too late proved catastrophic. They planned for a war of short, decisive battles where spirit and tactical skill would overcome material disadvantages. They got a war of industrial attrition, where American factories produced replacement equipment faster than Japanese forces could destroy it. Mitchell Page survived the war and lived until 2003, witnessing how his actions on Bloody Ridge became legendary within the Marine Corps. He consistently deflected credit to his weapon and his training, noting that any Marine machine gunner with equivalent preparation could have achieved similar results given the same circumstances. This humility masked a profound truth. Page could achieve those results precisely because American industry provided him with the world's best machine gun. American training gave him the skills to employ it effectively, and American logistics ensured he had unlimited ammunition. Remove any one element, the superior weapon, the thorough training, or the abundant supply, and his achievement becomes impossible. The M1919 remained in American service for decades after World War II, seeing combat in Korea and Vietnam before finally being replaced by more modern designs in the 1970s. This remarkable longevity testified to the soundness of Browning's original design and the quality of American manufacturing. Weapons produced in the 1920s were still functioning flawlessly 50 years later, having fired hundreds of thousands of rounds through some of the worst combat environments on Earth. No Japanese machine gun achieved comparable service life. Most were scrapped immediately after the war. None remained in frontline service beyond the late 1940s. The technical gap that existed during the war only grew wider in peacetime, as American industry continued advancing while Japanese manufacturing rebuilt from wartime destruction. Today, the M1919 occupies an honored place in military history as one of the most successful weapons ever designed. Over 250,000 were produced. They served with dozens of countries. They fought in every American conflict from World War I through Vietnam. And they established the template for machine gun design that influences weapons development to this day. Mitchell Page's Medal of Honor citation hangs in the National Museum of the Marine Corps, a testament to extraordinary courage under fire. But the deeper story is told by the weapons themselves, preserved in museums worldwide, silent witnesses to the moment when American industrial might, embodied in 41 pounds of steel and walnut, rewrote the rules of infantry combat. The two-man weapon that killed 41 Japanese in 1 hour wasn't just a machine gun. It was the physical manifestation of American industrial democracy at war. It represented a nation that could design, produce, and field weapons of unmatched quality in quantities that overwhelmed any opponent. It symbolized a military that trusted technology to multiply individual combat power rather than demanding human sacrifice to compensate for inferior equipment. Japanese soldiers who faced American machine gun fire experienced this reality firsthand. Their courage couldn't overcome physics. Their determination couldn't defeat engineering. Their willingness to die couldn't match weapons designed to kill efficiently and reliably for hours without pause. The mathematics were inescapable. One Marine with one M1919 and sufficient ammunition could generate more effective fire than an entire Japanese platoon. Two Marines working as a coordinated crew could dominate a battlefield sector that would require a company to defend using Japanese weapons. A machine gun section could create fire density that stopped attacks by forces 10 times their number. These weren't theoretical calculations. They were demonstrated repeatedly across 3 years of Pacific combat. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, American machine gunners proved that superior weapons, superior training, and superior supply could overcome numerical disadvantage and tactical surprise. The legacy extends beyond military history. The M1919's success validated American manufacturing philosophy: precision over expedience, quality over quantity, though ultimately achieving both. It demonstrated that investment in training paid dividends in combat effectiveness. It showed that logistics and supply were as important as tactics and courage. For Marines who served in the Pacific, the M1919 represented more than just a weapon. It was the tool that gave them a fighting chance against a fanatic enemy willing to accept any casualties to achieve objectives. It was the equalizer that allowed outnumbered defenders to hold against overwhelming attacks. It was the foundation of their confidence that American firepower would prevail over Japanese numbers. Mitchell Page's hour of sustained combat on Bloody Ridge crystallized all these truths into a single narrative. One Marine, one weapon, unlimited ammunition, and the training to employ them effectively proved sufficient to stop a regimental attack and kill 41 enemy soldiers in 60 minutes. The story became legend within the Marine Corps, told to every new machine gunner as proof of what was possible when skill met preparation, met superior equipment. But the real lesson transcended individual heroism. It revealed that modern warfare had become as much about industrial capacity as military valor. The side that could design better weapons, manufacture them in greater quantities with higher quality, train operators more thoroughly, and supply them more reliably, would win regardless of enemy courage or tactical skill. Japan learned this lesson in blood across countless Pacific battlefields. Their soldiers died by the tens of thousands facing weapons their nation couldn't match. Their machine gunners fought bravely with inadequate tools against opponents equipped with the world's best. Their determination and tactical skill proved insufficient against American industrial might. The two-man weapon, the simple concept of a gunner and assistant working together to maximize a machine gun's effectiveness, became the symbol of this broader industrial and tactical superiority. It represented coordination, teamwork, and trust in technology rather than individualistic heroism. It embodied American military culture's emphasis on systematic effectiveness over dramatic gesture. Today, when military historians analyze the Pacific War, they point to industrial production statistics, logistical achievements, and technological superiority as decisive factors in Allied victory. Behind those statistics and achievements were individual weapons like the M1919 and individual Marines like Mitchell Page, who transformed industrial potential into battlefield reality. The story of how a two-man weapon killed 41 Japanese in 1 hour is ultimately the story of American victory in the Pacific. It's a story of superior design defeating inferior equipment, of thorough training overcoming numerical disadvantage, of industrial democracy outproducing totalitarian dictatorship, of a nation that trusted its citizens to master sophisticated weapons and proved that trust justified through countless battles across thousands of miles of ocean. Mitchell Page and his M1919 machine gun wrote one chapter in that story on the night of November 7, 1942. But thousands of other Marines, with thousands of other machine guns, wrote similar chapters throughout the war. Each demonstrated the same fundamental truth. When American industrial might armed American fighting men, the outcome was never in doubt. The only question was how long it would take for superior firepower to grind down enemy resistance. The answer came in August 1945 when Japan surrendered, having learned through 4 years of devastating combat that they had challenged an enemy whose industrial capacity exceeded their own by factors they couldn't overcome. The two-man weapon and the Marines who mastered it had taught that lesson with devastating clarity. From Guadalcanal's jungles to Okinawa's caves, the steady hammering of M1919 machine guns had been the soundtrack of Japanese defeat. 41 kills in 1 hour, 200 in one night, thousands across years of combat. The numbers told a story of industrial warfare at its most efficient and most lethal. That story began with John Moses Browning's genius, continued through American industrial excellence, and culminated in Marines like Mitchell Page, who proved that superior weapons in skilled hands were the ultimate force multiplier. The two-man weapon had helped win the Pacific War, one sustained burst at a time, one barrel change at a time, 1,000-round belt at a time. The Japanese had faced many enemies in their imperial expansion, but they had never faced an enemy who could arm every two-man team with a weapon capable of stopping a battalion. They had never confronted industrial capacity so vast that ammunition was unlimited and weapons were disposable. They had never encountered a military culture that trusted machinery as much as morale. When they did, the result was inevitable. American industry had armed its Marines with the world's best machine gun. American training had taught them to employ it with devastating effectiveness. American logistics had ensured they would never run out of ammunition. And American Marines had proven that these advantages were decisive. Mitchell Page's 41 confirmed kills in 1 hour weren't an anomaly. They were proof of concept, proof that American weapons worked as designed, proof that American training produced results, proof that American industry could provide the tools of victory, and proof that in modern warfare, the nation with superior industrial capacity would prevail regardless of enemy valor. The two-man weapon had killed 41 Japanese in 1 hour. Over 4 years of war, it had helped kill hundreds of thousands. It had made victory possible. It had saved American lives by the tens of thousands. And it had demonstrated once and forever that in industrial warfare, manufacturing quality mattered as much as combat courage. That was the lesson of Bloody Ridge. That was the story of the M1919. That was how a two-man weapon changed the Pacific War. And that was why Japan, despite the bravery of its soldiers, could never overcome an enemy whose factories could produce unlimited quantities of superior weapons that simply refused to fail. The hammering of the machine gun fell silent on Guadalcanal at dawn on November 8, 1942. But its echo would resound through every Pacific battle that followed, a reminder that American industrial might had armed its Marines with the tools to win. And win they did, one sustained burst at a time, until the rising sun finally set on Japanese imperialism.